Look, see PowerPoint?
Mhm.
Yep. Okay, cool. Well, here we go. Everybody's most anticipated topic, I suppose, or at least it's the only topic where kids who aren't in anatomy randomly show up in my class. So, it certainly must be everybody's favorite topic. Last year I had like 4 seniors roll in and I'm like, you're not even part of this class. Well, we just want to be here for this chapter. Get out of here. Anyways, so we're going to talk about the reproductive system. It's a lot of slides. So, I put, let's see, I put the PowerPoint. If you go into your anatomy class on Edmodo and go into folders, I put the PowerPoint, and every diagram you will need is all in that folder. So treat that just like you would when I come into class and say, here's a chapter's worth of worksheets, fill them out as we progress through the chapter. You can do that. I'll put a due date on it at some point and just have you hold up your worksheets and be like, it's done. Okay, of course. And they're not tricky. The blanks are all on the PowerPoint slide, that kind of stuff. So just treat that way. Don't be intimidated by the PowerPoint. It is a lot of slides, but it's not like an impossible amount of information. So just don't be intimidated by that. We can stick to it pretty close to a 2-week schedule, just like we always have. And so, it's just a different body system. So reproductive systems, just kind of to set the tone for it, bear in mind that it is, the whole point of having Zoom meetings is so you can ask questions, and that's a good thing. Otherwise, I would just talk to my computer in the mornings and post it to YouTube. And I like your questions, so just kind of run them through the filter of, if you have a question, is it an anatomy question or is it a sex ed question? Because it's not sex ed class, it's anatomy class. And there's some overlap, but there's significant differences there. And just bear that in mind. It's anatomy, and it's a pretty cool conversation when it's all said and done. So here's where we're gonna do this. Guys first, girls second. Male reproductive organs, everything on the outside, everything on the inside, then physiology. Then girls next, everything on the outside, everything on the inside, then physiology. That's the flow of this. Guys, I don't know why you go first. I think it should be ladies first, but I didn't make the PowerPoint. I stole it and modified it. But I think it's because, if we're being honest, guys are simpler, right? Like, so much simpler than the girls' end of this whole thing is. So that's kind of how we're progressing through that. So just so you know what to anticipate. So here's some common sense stuff that you probably don't have to write down. What's the function of the reproductive system? Well, it's to make teeny tiny baby humans. No duh. If you don't make more of your species, you tend to go extinct. And so the function is to make a little tiny baby. And so produce and nurture reproductive cells. You probably don't have to write that down. If a male is not making sperm, he will have a very difficult time making tiny babies. If a woman is not making eggs and ovulating eggs, she will have a very difficult time having babies. This is not just for humans. This is for all placental mammals. Males must make sperm, females must make eggs. We must unite sperm and eggs and implant a safe little teeny tiny embryo and grow it up and birth a baby. And that's the way it works, right? We also have to transport cells to the sites of fertilization. This is different in males and females, so we'll get to it too much. But basically, the no duh point is that the sperm can't just stay in the testes and make babies. Duh. The eggs cannot stay in the ovaries and make babies. Duh. But there is kind of a nice little funnel, a very small place called a fallopian tube, where there's a really good chance of sperm meeting an egg. And so getting all of this to kind of coincide both anatomically and also chronologically is the trick to making baby humans, and that's kind of cool. The one that you're most familiar with being in high school, is secreting hormones. Probably not surprising to you. You're all anatomical adults. I would imagine most all of your growth plates have closed. You're all past the point of puberty. So they're secreting sex hormones. The part that you might not know is that the men generally are secreting something called testosterone, along with other sex hormones called androgens, and the women are secreting estrogens. But what you might not know is that men secrete both testosterone and estrogen. They just have more testosterone than estrogen, so they get male secondary sex characteristics. Whereas females secrete both. Oh, time out. Pause. What's up, buddy? You hurt your head. Oh, come here. Hug it out. Hug it out. What'd you hurt your head on, dude? What? Oh, the door handle? Oh, that's the worst. Okay, you gonna be okay? No. Okay. All right. Here, you go. Go watch Jake and the Neverland Pirates. Go. Go. Okay, I love you. Be tough. You're tough. Go be tough. 3 years old, man. You're the same height as kitchen counters and door handles. And it just, it's he takes a lot of shots to the head. Sometimes he also walks into walls. And I don't feel that bad about that because it's like that, come on, you did that. Anyways, sorry. Hold on. I have a chat box I have to check. I'm slow at this. I have a question. Oh, sure. Thanks, John Vankus. Sorry for the slow response. What's your question, sir?
So this is for the beginning of the chapter. Abby Chris made me watch a video. It's kind of funny over this.
It's called The Great Sperm Race, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
John Vankus.
We're going to watch that video.
Okay. John, we're not going to watch that video in class.
Can you make it just something to watch? Just post that in Moto if you want to. It's a great video.
There's a couple minor things, in that particular documentary that make it so I'm not comfortable using it in class or posting it. If you were to find it on your own, without my recommendation, would there be a lot of good information in there? Yep, there would be. I'm not telling you to find it. Are we squared away there with that, John?
Yeah, but Abby already made me watch it.
Well, as I frequently tell my kids, no one can make you do anything. Don't give me that excuse. So good for you, John. I'm sure you've learned quite a lot. Juliana.
So since men and women both produce estrogen and testosterone, can there be an imbalance and they end up developing characteristics of the other gender? Is that why some women back in the day, they grew beards and then they were like the bearded ladies or whatever?
Yes, that's a great question, that's exactly where we're getting when Samuel came in here crying, was that women produce and secrete both estrogen and testosterone, but less testosterone and more estrogen. So you get secondary sex characteristics that are typical of females. But bear in mind that, the benefit of sexual reproduction is genetic diversity. We're all genetically diverse. So it's a spectrum, right? So, more testosterone is going to be shoulders broader than the hips, thicker skin, bigger muscles, deeper voice, more body hair, right? And then estrogen would be less body hair, hips broader than shoulders, that kind of stuff, right? But there's a spectrum. So not every guy in the world has the same density of hair on his armpits or his arms, right? Some guys are super, super hairy. Other guys are almost bald, right? So there's this big spectrum in, these secondary sex characteristics. Some guys have super broad shoulders and some guys have shoulders that are closer to the size of their hips. That doesn't mean that guy's secreting so little testosterone that he won't effectively produce or transport sperm cells or anything like that. But it does mean that there's a spectrum, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. Could you be a girl who secretes a little more testosterone than the average girl? Yeah, you absolutely could. Could you be a guy who secretes a little more estrogen than the average guy or less testosterone than the average guy? Yes, there's a spectrum. So that's a great question. Okay, cool. So everybody good there? All right, moving on. Here we go. So they also regulate reproductive physiology. In males, this is pretty straightforward. Start the production of sperm, maintain the production of sperm, and get sperm out of there. That's about it. Guys are pretty simple. Girls are super complicated. Which we'll do this whole thing. It's not that bad, but it's complicated. And I've got a graph for you that'll help you figure it out. But what now, mister? I'll get you a snack in 17 minutes. He just falls on the floor crying. Okay, hey, tell Eden she can get you a snack. Go have Eden get you a snack. She gets really unhealthy snack options. Well, go. Eden, you have my permission to get Sam a snack. Go. Go, tiny man, go. Okay, we're back. Female reproductive physiology is much more complicated than males. Basically, they have primordial follicles that they were born with, that they will turn into mature eggs. Then, and this is all hormonally controlled, they will ovulate the egg at the same time as thickening the endometrium of a uterus, which is the inner lining, so that it's ready to receive an embryo should that egg be fertilized. The egg travels down a fallopian tube. Assuming that there's no sperm cell to meet it, the egg goes through unfertilized. The egg and then the endometrium all are discharged out of the uterus and out of the body, and the whole cycle repeats itself with starting to thicken up that lining and to ovulate another egg ballpark every month, right? Your textbook will say 28 days, but there's variation. We're humans. There's variation there. So basically, yet again, the girls are more complicated than the guys. Okay, so that's just going to be the trend here. So guys' anatomy. This is pretty straightforward. Functions, no duh, produce and maintain sperm. If the guy's not making sperm, well, hold on, pause. I have this bad habit of like assuming, sperm are the little cells with the tail that swim. Semen is the liquid product of ejaculation that contains sperm cells in a basic fluid. The vagina and vaginal orifice are quite acidic, and not surprising to you, if you put acid on tiny cells, the tiny cells die. Now that's advantageous for all of the females, of course, because bacteria and fungi would like to live in and survive in a vagina, which would probably not be great, but keeping it slightly acidic kills the bacteria and fungi and severely limits the odds of having infections down there. But it also kills sperm cells. The workaround there is if the environment that the sperm cells are heading into is acidic, then make sure that the semen that contains the sperm cells is slightly basic. Basic, acid, neutral, cells survive, swim, and if everything's working out with the timing, then, you'll have a bouncing baby boy or girl in 40 weeks or whatever. So that's, a long road to say that sperm and semen are different things, but you know what sperm cells are probably. If not, I have a diagram later. Anyways, you have to also transport the sperm and supporting fluids to the outside. Kind of a no-duh there. If the sperm cells just stay in a testis forever, you're certainly not going to have too many children. And so transporting sperm to the outside, yes, go have Eden get you some. Go. I tell you, of all the lectures my kids have to walk in on, it's okay. They'll figure it out sooner or later. All right. So the sperm cells obviously have to be transported to the outside. You'll note that the route they take is a little bit crazy. They really only have to get from a testis to here, right? That whole distance is like, I don't know, an inch. But the route that they take is like this: down, up, all the way around the prostate by the bladder, through a couple of glands, down through the root of the penis, out through the urethra, and then out of the body. It's like, holy moly, there are some detours going on here. But that's the way that sperm are transported outside of the body. And we're going to kind of take that one little gland at a time, because there are several accessory glands, because the testis is making the sperm cells, which is great. Like, we totally need those. But all of these little glands that it runs through, you'll notice there's a gland right here. There's another gland right here. Whoops, I kind of wrote through its name. I'm sorry. There's another gland right here. Goodness gracious. Okay. And then finally, you're in the urethra, right? And so, it takes this kind of long, convoluted route around, but that long, convoluted route is basically, oversimplification, sperm cells come out of the testis, all of these glands are adding basic compounds and other fluids to keep the sperm cells alive and to not let them die immediately. And then when they're finally, shot out of the body, right, ejaculated is the term, then they have the best chance of survival in this slightly acidic environment to go on to make a new tiny human, because that's their job. And then obviously to secrete male hormones. If you didn't know, which I assume you probably didn't, testosterone and testis, or testicle, it might be a word you've heard instead of testis, they sound a lot alike, right? So testosterone is manufactured in the testes, if you didn't know, and now you know. So the testes not only make sperm cells, but they also make testosterone. Testosterone gets in the blood and flows all over your body. Testosterone is also made in other accessory organs in very small quantities, which is how women can create small amounts of testosterone with, of course, not having testes. So, there's kind of a no-duh point, but something important as well. Okay, so let's see. Pardon me. All right, scrotum. If you haven't heard the word scrotum, that is a pouch of skin. It hangs out of the lower abdomen where the testes are housed. Both males and females have gonads. The difference is that female gonads are called ovaries, and they are inside the pelvic cavity. Abdominal cavity? Abdominal pelvic? I don't know. Anyways, they're inside, okay? The guy's gonads are the testes, and they are outside of the body. Kind of sounds like a weird question, but I'm gonna ask because it's sort of funny. Does anybody have a guess as to why guys' testes are outside of the body and not just conveniently inside like women's are? Peyton has a guess. Peyton, what's your guess, sir?
Keep them cooler.
And he's exactly correct. Good answer. Jacob McIntyre, was that your guess as well? You had a hand up.
Yeah.
Yes, he's got it. And there's just so many funny examples of this, but we'll just pick a couple. He's correct. The temperature for correct sperm production is cooler than the 98 degrees your body normally runs at. So if the testes were inside the abdominal cavity, they would be too hot to produce good sperm. And as strange and oddly hilarious as it is, there is a muscle called the cremaster muscle, responsible for a reflex called the cremaster reflex, which is doing its best to regulate the temperature of your testes without you actually thinking about it. And every guy knows this who's ever jumped into a freezing cold lake of water, because they climb, okay, right up next to the abdomen, because they know, I don't know how they know, that lake water is way too cold and is going to kill some sperm cells. So those things need to be warmer, and they elevate. And so the other end of this is if, see, I'm always running this in my head through a filter of, this is going on YouTube. Okay. If a guy were to like to wear particularly tight-fitting underwear or particularly tight-fitting jeans, and those particularly tight-fitting clothes were to kind of push the testes up close to the body, it's kind of a funny thing. It can actually lower the effective sperm count because the testes are kept hot by those pants or underwear that are holding them too close to the abdomen, and you will make fewer sperm per ejaculate, and you'll also make poor quality sperm, which is things like sperm with two tails or sperm with one head or two heads and one tail. And you should have one head and one tail. That's the fastest sperm. And when they get two tails, they're not like a super sperm. They're slower and they don't win the race. And so that's interesting. I don't know. I think it's interesting and kind of a funny thing. And maybe you'll all look at whitey tighties differently in the future. Who knows? I don't. Anyways, so something kind of interesting, I think. So let's see. There are two chambers, one chamber for each testis. There's two testes, of course. There's one testis in each chamber, and there's a serous membrane in between the testes. They are actually up in the abdomen when a baby boy is first developing, being born, and then they come down out of the abdomen into the scrotum through that inguinal canal right before birth, during birth, something like, you know, like right at the finish line, which is kind of that I think is kind of a fascinating thing. So let's see, that's a scrotum and the testis and its job. I think we pretty much got that. Okay, so pardon me. Now the next thing is the penis. The penis kind of has two jobs because there's only one tube going through it called the urethra, and so that same tube must be used both for urine and for semen. That's just the way it was designed. It is a cylindrical organ, obviously, that is going to let urine come out of the body. It's going to let semen come out of the body, and they're going to come out through the urethra. That probably doesn't surprise you when you look at this diagram. You have your urinary bladder from last chapter with the urethra from last chapter, but it kind of converges here. Let's see. I think we can draw this line. I think we should draw it not in red. Here we go. Hold on. I'm changing pen color. Yellow looks good. Okay. Oh yeah, it's urine. Let's make it yellow. Okay. So urine in the urinary bladder comes out of the urethra right here, and it's going to converge. Pen color. No, not pen color. Sorry. I'm technologically challenged apparently. Okay. And then the semen that we drew earlier is coming up here through here. This gland right here, seminal vesicle, adds a bunch of stuff to it. And that's kind of like the on-ramp onto the highway here. And then we're at the urethra. Okay, I know that drawing's not great, but two different ducts, right? One from bladder, one from, we'll just go straight to the name, vas deferens. Vas deferens is the tube that transports sperm cells from the testis all the way to the urethra. So like here we're at vas deferens. That's this guy right here. Somewheres in here, you technically change names to ejaculatory duct. I'm not that concerned that you guys have that memorized. But then they converge right here, and we are at the urethra. And the urethra is going to carry what it needs to carry outside of the body that way. So any questions about that, or does that kind of make sense? Cool. All right, cool. Moving on. Maybe moving on. All right. 4 minutes. I think we can get this done in 4 minutes. Maybe, kind of. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. So basically there's a root or a bulb, which is where the penis kind of enters the abdominal cavity essentially, or the pelvic cavity, I should say. And then the shaft or the body of the penis is obviously the cylindrical part. And then there's what's called the glans penis. Okay, so the glans penis is basically the head of the penis where the urethra is going to leave the body. That's the exit, right? In America, where we live, most of the guys have had this taken off, but the prepuce is the term for foreskin. That's the anatomical term for foreskin. Circumcision, super common in America for a variety of reasons. Most of them are religious and historical reasons, but the prepuce, if it's left on, it's difficult to get clean between the glans and the prepuce, and essentially it houses bacteria, it houses moisture, and that's a bad thing for that. It doesn't mean that, you know, somebody who's uncircumcised is going to like struggle with health issues their whole life with you know, these sorts. That's not the case, but it is much more difficult to clean. So I think that's probably plays a role in so many other countries having these incredibly high circumcision rates as well. So that's the structure of the penis. There are 3 columns of tissue in the penis. So if you took this right here, we took the prepuce, which is the foreskin, the glans penis, which is the head. The urethral orifice is obviously where the urethra is leaving the penis, and you were to cut it like so, okay, and look down, that would be this view right here. And so what you basically get are 2 bodies. Corpus is Latin for body. So like if you've ever heard the word corpse, as in like for a dead body, that's where corpus comes from. So you've got corpus spongiosum, put a little star here, and corpus cavernosa. And these things I would like you to know. So if you haven't written too much down, because a lot of it's very common sense stuff, go ahead and write down corpus cavernosa and corpus spongiosum. Sorry, my tracing on the trackpad is not great. And we'll probably run out of time by the time we get to these, but that's fine. We have 1 minute. We can do it, I believe, kind of. We'll see. Okay. Pretty logical design here. Here's what you got with corpus cavernosa and corpus spongiosa. The names are pretty good. The cavernous body is the body with many big spaces, and then the spongy body, spongiosum, is the one that is spongy or collapsible. No duh. And the reason that makes this design kind of interesting is what you get is essentially, let's say this side right here is the top. Okay. This would be, let's say, anterior and superior. So that's this side, okay? The bottom, where the urethra comes out, is this side. Okay. Now, what makes this design particularly interesting is that the spongiosum is a tissue that's always soft, okay? So the urethra flows through the spongiosum tissue, which is a handy design because when a male gets an erection, what causes the erection is all of these blood vessels right here will cause the capillaries in the corpus cavernosa to fill with blood. So the caverns, the tiny caves that we were talking about, those empty spaces, are there for a reason. They're to be filled with blood. So when they fill with blood, the male gets an erection, right? But the issue with that is if a penis becomes very hard because it's erect, it would shut off the urethra, right? So nothing could leave. And the goal for reproduction is obviously you have to get semen transported outside of the body. So you can't shut the urethra down or you would get no semen outside of the body. So this spongy tissue in here stays soft even during an erection and allows semen to still leave the body while the corpus cavernosa are what are making the penis hard or erect. And so that's kind of a cool design. I also had a student tell me it looks like ET, which I think is quite funny because it does look like ET. Anyways, so we're at 9:31. I'm sorry, I went 1 minute over, and I know you guys have enough screen time to give a horse a migraine, so I want to get you off your laptops as soon as possible. So